but I'll stick to my little zone of the Constitution. As we all know, the First Amendment protects your right to freedom of assembly, and that is essentially suspended until further notice, and that is unprecedented in I think at any time in history have we seen the not just the United States, but I mean globally. Now, this is not just a uniquely American value. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights at Article 20 protects freedom of assembly. The International Convention on Human Rights at Article 21, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the Italian Constitution. I mean, almost every country that you'd consider remotely free protects this. And I am not I don't want to editorialize too much, but I often can't resist. But if we look at the fact that it has been suspended, that should, I hope, what makes me uncomfortable is not that it's been suspended. It's that how few people are uncomfortable with the fact that it's been suspended. Any one of our rights under the Constitution is, we like to say that they are inviolable. But any one of them is subject to abridgment at certain times. As much as we like to say they cannot be, everything's a balancing test. It's not exactly the worst place to bring a challenge like this. But we're also now seeing challenges on the basis of freedom of religion. Now, if you think about the fact that this has effectively banned congregations, how do you continue to practice your religion? And is this the least restrictive way you could do it? So, I think that if we're going to accept the science, it's probably irresponsible to pack 50 or 500 people into the same building at the same time. What is the point of the rest of us? I mean, you can see this. I don't usually have this beard. I just decided I'm not going to shave till I'm done. I thought it wasn't going to last that long. My credo is about to fall apart as I look like a member of ZZ Top, or people start to throw change at me as I walk down the street and say, "You poor man." But as this goes on, are there not less restrictive means? In Texas, I was monitoring one county where a local judge did say to a priest, "Hey, it makes perfect sense what you want to do," because he wanted to hold his services in the parking lot with everybody in their cars. Now, that is a judge who was thinking about the Constitution, and he lifted the ban for that purpose. Now, I think in Florida, we'll see, because in Florida, they've essentially said, we're not going to restrict your right to attend services. And while that's wonderful from a freedom of religion perspective, I have to question whether it is wise, and whether other kinds of assembly should not also be opened up. But I don't see any reason why the government couldn't say, if you are going to have an assembly, we will allow you to, if you perhaps, and the thought of the government giving me a permit makes me really uncomfortable, but it's better than not having it. So if you ask, yes, you can have an assembly, however, you're going to need somebody there to ensure public health. Now, if that is something that the government could approve, I don't see a problem with that. But I do see a problem with just this reflexive until further notice. Nothing in this has an expiration date. And we're seeing for example, in Pennsylvania, there was a restriction recently that, I don't want to get into the next speaker's subject too much, but firearm sales only by appointment, one person at a time. And a lawyer that I'm in contact with there said he's concerned that this isn't necessarily going to go away. Authoritarians always love a crisis, because, we saw this after 9/11 when they passed the Patriot Act. There was restrictions on freedom of association, restrictions on freedom of speech, we still, I mean, I don't know if any of you have applied for a loan anytime recently, but you still, each one of you is still going to have to prove that you're not a terrorist rather than the presumption being that you aren't. And that's because of something that they said was temporary 20 years ago. So I get worried when I see these restrictions coming down on assembly, on speech, on religion. And I say, you know, at what point is this going to go back to normal? And it's not. You know, this is not the kind of crisis that you get to just say it's over. It's not like we're going to have a, you know, the Germany surrenders and Japan surrenders, and then, you know, we have the people dancing in the streets and it's all over. There is no end event. At some point, things are going to have to loosen up. But at what point is the government going to give up the abilities that it's gained so far? And, you know, what point is it going to not enjoy the addictive feel of keeping us all under control? You know, there is precedent for this. I did some research that there was a challenge in 1905 to the state mandating vaccinations during a smallpox epidemic in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And the plaintiff argued that that was unreasonable, arbitrary, and oppressive. However, given the epidemic posed a threat to all citizens of the city, and without universal vaccination, attempts to halt the spread of the virus would be hampered. So, you know, we're unfortunately finding ourselves in we are in a collectivist situation here, you know, and it rubs us the wrong way as Americans, or I hope it does. You know, I hope every single one of you can say, I'm doing my part, but, you know, it really ought to feel like, you know, you've just dumped itching powder into your undergarments. I mean, I hope every single one of us can say that this is gone. You know, we've just, I don't want to do it, but I'll do it. But I remember freedom of assembly. You know, I think if you have challenges to this, you know, as we're going forward, we're going to see challenges to this as people start to realize what else is melting away. You know, when you think about the fact that freedom of assembly, you know, if we wanted to protest right now, how do we do it? You can't go assemble on the town green because the town green's got police tape around it, and there's no way you can go there. If more than a certain number of us go out on the street, we're going to be arrested for that. I mean, I've seen videos and I've gotten reports of people being arrested for not socially distancing and then being put into a jail cell with 29 other people, which also seems to defeat the purpose. But you know, you take these restrictions, you give them to somebody who thirsts for them, and then, you know, you hand them down to local police where, heck, you know, sometimes you've got local police departments that are very enlightened, and other times you don't. You know, I was sent a video of a guy in New York who, you know, I think everybody in this story is terrible, but you know, there's a group has set up hospital tents in a park in New York. Now, New York is where I hear most of the screaming that your liberties don't matter when people are dying, which is an unfortunate perspective. But, you know, most of my friends who live there are telling me to shut up about the Constitution while people are dying. I have a lot of friends in Brooklyn. I can't help that. But then this group happens to be a very devout Christian group that also has problems with homosexuals. So I don't know why they have a problem with that when they're treating people. You know, you go to the hospital, the doctor doesn't ask you what your jollies are, but that's up to them. Meanwhile, they're not turning anybody away. So a guy wanted to go up to where their tent was and put up one of those gay rainbow flags just as a sign of protest. I don't really see a problem with that from a First Amendment perspective. But he hops over the fence into a park that is now shut off from the public, so he cannot do that. The cops then tackle him, beat the hell out of him, drag him away in handcuffs, and he spends the night in the Tombs for stepping into an area of 100 acres of empty space that he wasn't supposed to go in because it would have spread the virus. And I think everybody in this situation with varying degrees is wrong, right? The guy could have put it up outside the perimeter and probably spoken his message a little louder. Seeing the cops tackle somebody for planting a flag, especially a pretty frail guy in a pink suit. I mean, about the least threatening looking guy you could see. But it just shows these authoritarian tendencies are very, very much, come out of the woodwork when you have a justification like this. So another thing that has been, that's been troubling me for quite some time is the fact that a lot of our national discourse now has migrated online. Look at us here. Now, we are only here because Zoom allows us to be here. The large Silicon Valley social media companies decided back in 2016 they weren't very happy given the election results with what had happened. And I feel like all of Silicon Valley had a collective, had a collective heart attack when Trump was elected, because in 2008, when Obama was elected, his team really had control of the internet. Not necessarily control, but he's the one who knew, his campaign knew how to work the internet. His campaign knew how to communicate that way. And as a result, I think that had a very strong effect on Obama's election. And I think the Democratic Party just kind of sat back and said, well, we don't need to do any additional research on that. We've already won that area. And little did they know that in the next 8 years, Republicans started to learn how to use the internet as well. And after that, the shock was just so great that you see Facebook banning conservative speech, Twitter banning conservative speech. You see just today, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Michael Cernovich, but he has a great video called Hoaxed. If you can still find it, I would really recommend watching it. Mike's a really strong conservative voice that was, and Amazon took him off of there today. Took that movie down completely, and it talks about how the mainstream media is working in concert to ensure that you are only given one narrative. So what happens, when I argue in court against these companies censoring people, I realize it's a losing battle because they are private property. They can do as they like. If Zoom wants to right now put in its terms of service that it can come into this meeting and say, I don't like the political views of the people that you're talking to, this group is now banned from using Zoom. There is nothing to stop them from doing that. So when we would argue about how these companies had a really deep hegemonistic control over freedom of expression and freedom of assembly, there would always be this smug response of, well, nobody's stopping you from protesting out in the street. Nobody's stopping you from going down to the public park. Well, now they are. So now we really are. You should realize how deeply you are governed now by really 4 or 5 companies that are, not too long of a driving distance from northern Nevada, but 4 or 5 private companies that have all put in their terms of service that we can change our terms of service anytime we like. And consistently, I mean, I lose all those cases. I as an attorney, I don't know if you've ever heard somebody say, an attorney brag that they never lost a case. If you ever hear an attorney say that, you should look at them and think, there's an attorney with absolutely no spine at all, because I take losing cases every day. And often something that I look at that I see that says a 1% chance of success, because, hell, the revolution didn't have much of a chance of success when it happened either. And there's the lot of our jurisprudence is paved with cases where there wasn't much of a chance of success. So I have taken on a number of these cases, and I call them my St. Jude cases, St. Jude being the Catholic patron saint of hopeless causes. But, you know, now the philosophy behind those cases is really starting to show itself. So that is something that, you know, I think I'm more here hoping that I can make sure I make more people uncomfortable with the status quo while explaining to you that the government probably can do about 90% of what it's doing. You know, they can ban something like this in an emergency. I don't think they're showing their work, and that's really where I get uncomfortable with it. So, you know, I'd really like to open things up to some. Oh, what happened? Did I do that? Oh no, okay. I'm seeing somebody's screen here. I'd really like. I'm seeing some comments over on the side, but you know, I'd really like to open it up to questions, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. You know, I can't answer every single constitutional question off the top of my head, but a hot bench is always helpful. So,
well, thank you, Mark. We had several people raise their hand while you were speaking. The first person that raised his hand was Greg Shannon. Greg, did you have a question for Mark?
No, I was accidentally pushing buttons randomly, so that's all that was. Sorry about that.
We have every right to do that.
I saw Monica had her hand up. So, Monica, did you have a question for Mark?
Yes, actually I did. Mark, thank you so much for doing this.
Sure.
I'm a local talk show host on the conservative station here, and I'm wondering, can these things be litigated after the fact? Because right now we're in a tough position because we have a recall effort going on against our governor right now, who has done some really horrendous things. You might have heard through almost every news center out there that he banned hydroxychloroquine.
Mm-hmm.
Then we found he was hoarding it. There are all kinds of issues, but this was well into the fact, and it has hindered the process now of going out and getting signatures and being able to address the public.
Yeah.
Can we go after the fact and either litigate the state for this, since they're kind of giving us two different answers? They have made the decision to do a vote by mail June 8th for our primary, but they said that they were given no leeway to extend the date of getting signatures for the recall petitions because they didn't have that kind of power.
Isn't that convenient?
Yeah, isn't that convenient? I think a lot of this stuff comes out after the fact. And are you just being petty, or should people, you know, bring this up after all is said and done?
No, I think they should bring it up while it's going on. I mean, this is precisely the time to bring constitutional challenges. You know,
there was the one state that had the, you know, no gatherings or anything like that, and the GOP came together because, once again, it's a Democrat governor saying this. The GOP came together and overturned it. We're not hearing anything from our GOP leaders. It just seems that the courts have been shut down. Our Supreme Court here in Nevada, our local courts. How do you fight it when they're shutting everything down around you?
I mean, it would be something I'd have to take a deeper look at. I haven't considered the whether such a suit would be successful at this time, but you'd bring a 1983 claim in federal court. Now, that poses its own problems because, you know, there was a case a couple weeks ago in Illinois where the federal judge, it was essentially a company that makes T-shirts with unicorns on them, something of no great constitutional import, but, you know, to the person that makes those, that's how they make a living. And somebody was selling knockoffs, so he brought a case and sought an injunction trying to get that stopped. And the judge essentially issued a very arrogant, very angry order saying, this is just not important enough to deal with right now. Now, when you look at that, and I think, yeah, you know, would the little bags and T-shirts with glittery unicorns on them really matter? Well, not to me, but, you know, I wonder how the judge would feel if, you know, if their livelihood were all of a sudden not just stopped, not just stolen. Imagine if their paychecks were all of a sudden diverted to somebody else. And as soon as they reported it, the authorities that would have done something about it would say it's not important enough to deal with, meaning there's no way it's going to stop. So I do find it very convenient. You know, I wouldn't imagine that Sisolak is so Machiavellian that he's making this decision solely based on, you know, fear of a recall. I mean, recalls have a very low chance of success, but that's not the point. You know, you take the St. Jude case, you know, and sometimes you take a case that you know you might not win just because you want to prove the point that it's going to be taken. And to say that you can change the fundamental structure of how people vote, but you cannot change the due date for recall ballots or for recall signatures doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But whenever you see something like this, you will see that they will always benefit incumbents, always benefit those who are already in power. I mean, upstarts need assembly. That's what assembly is for. Freedom of assembly and freedom of speech is there so that we can challenge those in power. And when those are restricted, this is what you'll get.
Thank you.
So I'd say take it on now. You know, I mean, I'm probably not in a position to bring a case like that right now, just given where I'm locked down so far away. But I mean, I'd certainly put out the word to some First Amendment attorneys to challenge that. I mean, that's
the unfortunate thing here in Nevada for any of the constitutional issues that we've had, or even getting the process started, even other things. We do not have attorneys come forward. We do not have.
Well, you know what? When we're done, you know, I'll give you my email address right now. It's mjr@randazza.com. RANDAZZA. Send me the information. I'll put out the word. You know, it might be something I could take a look at, and if not, I'll see if I can find somebody, because it would seem that if a recall petition is going to be simply doomed by the virus by virtue of what date the ballots have to be, the signatures have to be in, and the very government that's telling you can't go outside and get those signatures is going to be the one to benefit. That doesn't fit well constitutionally.
Yeah, and we did have a very large number of signatures at our first cutoff of turn-in for verification. So
right.
It does seem rather suspicious that all of a sudden they're seeing the amount of signatures and now they say, you guys just need to stay at home.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I always say never blame evil for something that its brother stupid might have done.
I'm going to steal that for the air.
So, you know, I always try to presume the best, because even if it's just stupid, you know, it's still going to get you to the same place, which is you can't get your signatures by your deadline, and that's because of a government restriction. And that very government that you are seeking to challenge is the one that told you can't do it. I mean, it's just a very simple equation of there's something wrong there. That at the very least, I want the government to do its work.
Should we save the emails and the texts that we get of people asking us where they can still sign or get involved to show that we had people that wanted to do this, but they couldn't because they were cut off? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd be a little bit surprised if there isn't an alternate means of gathering signatures. You know, it might be clumsy, it might be clunky. You might have to wear one of those, you know, suits that they wear in the Outbreak movie, you know, one of those yellow hazmat suits, and go to everybody and have everybody, hand them a single piece of paper in a sealed envelope. I don't know. You know, I'm just brainstorming that there might be other ways.
We're still doing it. It's just now we are starting to have law enforcement pull people over and ask them where you know, where they're going. So,
Sure.
all
And
right, I think I got the
okay.
the yanked out. So I'll stop dominating your time because I know people like.
All right. Well, it was a great question that allowed us to illustrate a lot of issues. So thank you for it.
Yeah, we have John. John wanted to ask you a question.
It's probably going to be at least
Okay.
15 minutes, but
1 second. Yeah, I can still hear you.
John, are you
Okay,
there?
go ahead. Yeah, I'm here.
John, did you have a question for Mark? Hello, John.
Question on open meeting law if he wants to touch on that.
Sure.
I mean, basically, they're Reno, you're not allowed to talk. Nobody shows up. You can't call in. Do you have an opinion?
So they're having public meetings, but there's no display of them to anybody in any way?
There, you can watch them. You can't talk.
Okay. Well, you know, that might be okay. I mean, I think normally at a public meeting, you know, you can't talk during their session. They'll usually open things up at the end to Q&A. I think, you know, a lack of Q&A after a public meeting, I don't know that you have a right to talk to them. You know, you have a right to protest outside the building, which you can't do right now. You have a right to sit there and see what they're doing. But I think, you know, a lot of the challenges that governments have with open meetings laws is, you know, you'll often have somebody there who's disruptive. I can see, I guess that doesn't get up my constitutional hackles as much as stopping people from getting signatures or saying, you know, we can change everything to vote by mail, but we're sorry, we just couldn't possibly extend that date. But, you know, but you do have the right to petition the government. So there may be alternate means of doing that. You know, you can certainly send in your objections, and I realize it's not the same. It's really not the same, especially if they have to have a public hearing with witnesses, and witnesses from the community are called. So if you have like a zoning meeting and you want to come down there and speak out against it, and they say, well, is anybody here to speak out against it? Well, guess not. Everybody's at home sheltering in place. That shouldn't matter. That shouldn't mean that nobody's opposed to it. And it's not, you know, it's not as though Nevada is a stranger to remote meetings. I mean, I've testified multiple times from the Grant Sawyer building when I couldn't get up to Carson City. So we're equipped for this. And, you know, you'll probably get the story that, well, we can't devote resources to that right now. And my response to that would be, what are you going to devote resources to that's more important than the Constitution? You know, is there something really more important than that? And you know, and that's a value judgment. You know, and I think, you know, to me, when I think about the values being balanced here, you know, and somebody says that, well, we've got to do this. You know, when you look at the mortality rates here, you know, when I think about this, I was explaining to my kids, I said, you know, if you think about this, as a parent, I can't think of a more kind plague to be visited upon us. I mean, we've got a plague that nobody's worried about the kids at all. And that's what a beautiful thing. I mean, I see I've got probably people who are in the age group, a lot of people in the age group that is in danger here. So I'm not to be callous to your needs, but you know, I go visit my parents every day and look at them through a fishbowl because they have to come out into their greenhouse for me to visit them. You know, and even they say, you know, we're 80 years old. We've lived a pretty good life. I don't want to see the entire country and our entire way of life gone so that we get another, you know, 6 to 8 years. And I said, you know, I get it. You know, we asked, and when you think about it in terms like that, I've seen some pretty emotional arguments where, you know, it seems funny. It seems conservatives and liberals have kind of just flipped their positions. They've just decided to switch sides now, where I hear conservatives saying, you know, maybe loss of some life is okay to protect our way of life. And well, we've always done that. In fact, every generation has asked a hell of a lot of people to put their lives on the line to protect our way of life. It's just those people are usually young men in the prime of their life who are being sent off to some foreign soil to risk their lives to protect our way of life. And when I hear, I'll poll the group here, maybe if people want to speak back to me on this and say I'm wrong, but I hear from most people who are in the high risk age groups saying they're willing to do that. But it seems to always just come down to politics that, but I hear the liberals saying not one life is worth any economic loss. And I'm just not sure that that's true. But, we can look at that, but, meanwhile, they're fighting to keep abortion clinics open at the same time. And, and I say, well, no matter what you feel about abortion, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, how are you arguing on one hand that we should throw the entire car into park while speeding down the highway, but we've got to make sure that the abortion clinics are open because we've got to save every life? I just pick a lane.
Yeah. Great question, Jeff. We got time for one more question from Mark. I see Mark Leonard has his hand up. Mark, I'm trying to unmute. There we go. Go ahead, Mark.
So, Mark, thank you for doing this. Are you seeing any activities around the country that give you some glimmer of hope that we're starting to stand up for our constitutional rights?
Yeah, I do. There's a few things happening. I will tell you, I've got, I mean, one of the things is, again, it seems frivolous, but if you look in the aid package, the loan, the bailout package, you cannot apply for that if your business delivers any what they say prurient content. Now, an army of strippers, it wouldn't be the first time that an army of strippers and pornographers has defended our constitutional rights. Larry Flint, no matter what you think of him, is responsible for a lot of your liberty. So we're bringing, my firm's actually working on a challenge to that in both federal court in Florida, and we've got some adult dancers in Colorado who want to challenge it. I see, I don't know if you've heard of a lawyer named Harmeet Dillon. She is
San Francisco.
Yeah, she's like, take me and make me attractive and smart, and you've got Harmeet. She is just kick-ass as a lawyer, and she's bringing a challenge in Pennsylvania to the restrictions on freedom of religion, saying that this blanket restriction on congregation is a problem. So I do see people, at least, look, there's always going to be people who are going to be awoke to a loss of constitutional rights. And, I see groups like this asking me to, when I saw that there was a group of people who cared about this, I mean, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I don't care if there's 3 people. I mean, at some point, we need to spread the word that the Constitution matters. And, to me, there's sort of a Venn diagram. There's the, we got to worry about circle 1 is we do have to worry about protecting life and health and safety. We also have to worry about protecting the economy because those are connected. I mean, if we have 40% unemployment, what's that going to do to public health? Yeah. So I don't want to save every life today so that we have civil war in 6 weeks that kills even more people. I mean, if you have, you have greater than 20% unemployment, you're going to have civil unrest, and that's going to hurt people. You're going to have if we don't have the money to run hospitals later on, we're going to sure wish that we had kept a few more businesses open. But then you also have civil liberties, because what the heck does it all mean if we don't have that? I mean, America is not, I like to tell people, America's not a place. I mean, there's nothing to do with America that matters about the territory. I mean, Guam is in the United States. Maine is America, from the swamps in Florida to mountains in Colorado. So there's nothing geographically, and the country's changed shape throughout its history. Nothing makes it geographic. It's not an ethnicity. I have probably nothing genetically in common with you, and you have nothing genetically in common with a Hawaiian. But the only thing that makes the United States is the idea. I mean, I was thinking about this on my bike ride this morning that, I don't know if the founders were geniuses. A lot of them, I mean, it's really funny when you think about that they were kids. Most of them were in their early 20s, but they came up with an experiment that the genius of it is every generation has added to it, interpreted it, and protected it and expanded it. Now, without that liberty, I don't know that how many of the 350 million of us want to be safe from catching a virus, but with absolutely no freedom at all. I mean, what's the point of it then? Then what are we? Then, we wind up like those little pods in the Matrix. I mean, are we all going to be sitting in our homes, working online, assembling as long as Twitter and Facebook and the CEO of Zoom are okay with it? Or at some point, are we going to say we're willing to risk some of Circle A for Circle B?
Thank you for the question, Mark. Monica, did you have another question?
Yeah, actually I do. And along the business line, Mark, when you're looking at the CARES Act that they're putting through, we have a lot of independent contractors here that nothing has been really focused on. We talk about the bars and restaurants incessantly, and yet nobody has mentioned the salons. And I have one fingernail and I'm wearing a baseball cap, but to lay down restrictions on salons, that they are the most regulated business, that they have to sterilize all of their equipment, they have to sterilize their areas that they work in. So it's a constant. The health department is always going in and checking them. Do they have any recourse for these arbitrary decisions of who's essential and who's non-essential? And then they don't even get any help when it comes to, putting money back into the economy. It's going to restaurants and people who can keep employees going. But since salons are private contractors, they don't have employees that they can take advantage of this.
I mean, I'm just a First Amendment guy, so I don't know that. I mean, if of course, any lawyer can come up with a really creative argument. One time early in my career, we were representing a massage parlor, and they were giving what's affectionately known as happy endings, and my and my boss at some point argued, no, they're not giving happy endings. Those are exfoliation treatments. And the prosecutor jumped up and said, exfoliation, they're using lubricant. And my boss said, Your Honor, this is not necessarily, if this is a consumer case, if they're not happy about the quality of the exfoliation, I agree is probably not the best way to do it, but I'm not an expert. And the judge said, yeah, I'll buy that. And I nearly fell out of my chair, as did the prosecutor. And I never understood how the hell we won that. So if you ask me to make a First Amendment argument for the salon people, I could probably come up with something, but I get it.
It's my right to have my nails done. and now they're saying you can't even go to somebody's house and get it done, even though they're still doing it. It's like, excuse me, it's my personal home.
Although, there is an element of, I do accept some of these restrictions on us. I don't think that we should, if you have contact with somebody, it's essentially, think about it like as if everybody did have it. If you tell people practice safe sex and then they go to one prostitute, well, then they've been with everybody that they've been with. It's, if you go to the salon, I mean, I'm in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and early into this, somebody flew their mom in from Italy because she was worried about her and the virus, and she went to two places. She came in, she went to the salon, and then she went to a St. Joseph's Day novena. And everybody at both of those places got it. You know, those are really good places to transmit the disease. I mean, you can't help but get near somebody. So, yeah, I feel for you, but you know, might have to figure out how to do it yourself.
That's true.
But you know, the only the one thing I want to leave you with, if there's no more questions, is just be vigilant. I mean, you're not going to be in a Patriot group if you're not already. So I'm somewhat speaking to the choir, but you know, be vigilant of other people's rights. You know, this is I've seen. I'm an officer in the First Amendment Lawyers Association, and I am embarrassed to tell you that one of our longest standing members and a member of our board actually asked on our listserv if there was any way that we could all think of to hold Fox News responsible criminally for its reporting. And, you know, and I mean, it's just horrifying to me. You know, that group is about 75% liberal. I consider myself to be pretty liberal, but I am considered to be a far, far right-wing conservative in that group. Let's put it that way. You know, and I said, what are you talking about? I mean, first, I don't know if anybody remembers, but, you know, Media Matters, which is paid for by George Soros, criticized Fox News because it was trying to create hysteria about this new virus. You know, that's in January. So Fox was being too interested in it then. And now they're saying, well, their coverage is irresponsible, so it's killing people. So they should be held liable for negligent homicide. And I said, I can't believe this is coming from a First Amendment lawyer. You know, when I think about constitutional rights, I try to think about them from the perspective of the person that, you know, whose voice I don't want to hear. That's got to be almost more important to me than the voices I want to hear. Because if you think that way, you know, the best day in a First Amendment lawyer's life, well, at least to me, you know, is when you are defending the speech of somebody who you really wish they would shut up anyway. You know, when you can stand there and say to the judge, Your Honor, I despise my client. And I do have to get clearance from my client before I say that, but they'll know. I'll say, look, I despise my client. I mean, I represented a Nazi in a case one time, and I told him, I said, look, there were two uncomfortable conversations with him I had to have. The first one was, listen, you should probably know your legal team's going to be a Sicilian, an Orthodox Jew, and a gay guy who's married to a Puerto Rican guy. And the line went quiet for a few seconds, and he said, well, sir, technically Sicilians are white now, which I said, which made me laugh and call my former father-in-law to say, in your face. Anyway, the other uncomfortable conversation was, I can't stand a damn thing that you say, and I'm going to be very public about that. You know, I wish that you would shut down your website. I wish you would stop saying the things you're saying. But damn it, if you can't, then nobody can. And you know, I just talked to that client recently because he lost that case, and we didn't bother to appeal it. But you know, it was ludicrous. And the same exact theory in that case a few months ago was used against Black Lives Matter, because the organizer of Black Lives Matter was held liable because somebody in one of his rallies got out of hand, and they said it was his fault. Now, I found that to be the exact same kind of case, and now I've got a very interesting situation where I have a Nazi who wants to speak out in favor of Black Lives Matter. And that to me is a beautiful First Amendment motion. You know, when you see something like that, you said, you know, can we file a friend of the court brief? And I said, that would really be something if a Nazi were coming out in favor of a black civil rights leader. And that's a beautiful American moment right there as well. Because if if the black civil rights leader had done the same thing when the Nazi was threatened, and I tried to get them to, and I said, you realize you're going to be the next victim of this. And I didn't realize that I'd be proven right so quickly. You know, and I couldn't get them to do it. I couldn't get any liberal organizations to care about this guy's speech, because they'd say, what do I care if the Nazi gets to speak? And I say, you don't get it. That's what America's about. You know, my beliefs are strong enough that they can stand in opposition to his. So, you know, stand up for stuff like that. Keep your eyes open for something like that, because there's going to be people who are going to want to shut down the speech of other people, because they're going to say it's just too dangerous now. It's too dangerous right now. You know, and when you hear the right now, you know, it's never a temporary situation.
Well, Mark, thank you so very much for all the information. We really appreciate it.